Part 3. Super Role Player. Author, Yuan-san Buletinji. Chapter 21. On the second day of Angzijia practice dribbling, Popovich arranged physical training in the morning and tactical training in the afternoon as usual. But unlike the past, Popovich added a set of offensive tactics for the afternoon tactical training. The point guard carries the ball to the front court. The wing player and the inside player make a cross screen near the free throw line. After the screen, the inside player raises the position and receives the ball to respond. The wing player runs to another screen point, the defender or the inside player gave another cross screen, the wing player ran to the three-point line at the bottom corner, the defender pulled to the other side, another inside player headed to the basket, and the high inside player was responsible for allocating the ball and looking for it. Attack opportunity. This is a set of blocking and cutting tactics for high position support. Angzi was pleasantly surprised to find that in this tactic, the wing players do not need to hold the ball, and it seems that according to his characteristics, he arranged the final three-pointer tactic. In fact, what Angzi doesn't know is that this tactic is a three-point tactic that Popovich figured out in one night for Angzi. Although the wing player's bottom corner three-pointer is only part of the tactic, this step is the position in the overall tactics is still very important. The Spurs training went through day after day. On December 9, the free market and transfer market opened. T.J. Ford officially signed with the Spurs. In addition, the number 9 pick in 2005, Ekdiogu, joined the Spurs for the new season. The 15-man lineup is all here. Point guards, Tony Parker, T.J. Ford, Corey Joseph; shooting guards, Manu Ginobili, Danny Green, Gary Neal, James Anderson; small forwards, Richard Jefferson, Kawhi Leonard, Angzi; power forwards, Tim Duncan, Dewayne Blair, Matt Bonner, Ike Diogu; center Thiago Splitter. In this way, all the Spurs are constantly training in the training hall with Popovich's offensive tactics. Every day, Angzi exhausts his strength in the morning physical training, and then after replenishing the nutritious meal at noon, he starts the same intense tactical training in the afternoon. At night, Angzi will practice alone in the training hall. T.J. Ford did not come to practice in the past 2 days, because his injury has healed and he can participate in the regular training of the team, but in order to protect his body, T.J. Ford no longer practice. However, Angzi, who has been practicing alone, already knows how to train her dribble. Every night, when practicing dribbling, Angzi will find her own rhythm first, and then penalize the ball through her fingertips. In this way, slowly, Angzi will become familiar with it. The entire process of dribbling. Greg, don't you think N's training volume is a bit too large? Upstairs in the training hall, Mike Budenholzer was working overtime with Popovich again. He was a little worried when he looked at Angzi, who was sweating downstairs. If this continues, will there be no physical damage? How about letting him stop practicing? Popovich shook his head and said, "It's okay, Mike, we will check the players every day. He is very healthy, there is no damage at all, not even a bit of fatigue, as if he was fine the day before." Going back exhausted, the next day he was full of blood and resurrected. Mike Budenholzer opened his mouth in surprise. Popovich smiled and continued, "He is in good health and has great resilience, so don't worry about him, Mike." In this way, under the indulgence of the coaching staff, Angzi's dribble improved rapidly, but this kind of improvement still made Angzi unable to satisfy, because in recent tactical training, his opponent changed from Richard Jefferson to Kawhi Leonard. Because of the teaching of the league's top shooting coach Chip Engelland, Kawhi Leonard's lame shooting has improved rapidly these days, from the previous offensive black hole to a shooter who can occasionally make a mid-to-long shot. With the addition of defense and excellent physical fitness, Kawhi Leonard was placed in the main team by Popovich. Facing the long-handed monster Kawhi Leonard, Angzi only realized what an NBA-level defense is. Angzi's improved dribble was still very good in front of Richard Jefferson, but once it was released to Kahi in Wylenard's hands, Angzi was intercepted from time to time. The defense of this long-hand monster made Angzi feel a struggle in tactical training. But there is no way, even a player with NBA average dribbling ability can hardly escape Kahi Leonard's steel. There are two facial paralysis in the Spurs locker room. One is the old facial paralysis of Tim Duncan, and the other is the new facial paralysis of Kahi Leonard. It happens that these two people are still sitting together, and the position is right in the middle of the locker room. So every time the teammates finished training and talked and laughed in the locker room, the center of the locker room seemed extraordinarily quiet and different. Tomorrow is the preseason game. Angzi decided to end his half-month continuous training, go home, and recharge his energy to prepare for the preseason game tomorrow. After taking a shower and changing clothes, Angzi stood at the door and waited for a while. When most of his teammates had left, Angzi also quietly took a basketball from the arena and dashed away. "Hey, this kid stole a basketball," Chip Engelland, the shooting coach who was tidying up the equipment in the arena, saw Angzi taking a basketball and running, and his mouth opened wide in surprise. Mike Budenholzer not far away smiled, "This kid. Don't worry, Chip, he will be back tomorrow." On San Antonio Street, there are few pedestrians. The city seems to be infected with the Spurs low-key style. The pedestrians on every road are hurrying, and they hardly stop to talk. Angzi drove the ball while trotting. Although he didn't practice at night, the dribbling training still couldn't be stopped, so this is why Angzi stole a basketball. Back to the apartment, Angzi was surprised to find that the next door, where there had been no one, was actually half hidden. Angzi looked there a few times, and then suddenly was startled by the rapid footsteps in the next room and hurriedly opened the door of his house. Hiding in the door and peeping, Angzi found that there was a quarrel next door, and a middle-aged white man was pushed out of the door. Then the middle-aged white man glanced at Angzi, and suddenly became a little frustrated, and shouted a few words into the door, "Abby, you are wrong like this, I have taught you since you were young." A beautiful woman suddenly appeared in the door next door, blonde and fair-skinned, with a sweet-looking appearance, which made Angzi stunned at once, so beautiful. "You don't need to care about my business," the beauty yelled angrily, and then slammed the door shut. An 11 only saw the middle-aged white man shrugging his shoulders and spreading his hands. He was so angry that he didn't know what to do. The atmosphere was a bit embarrassing. An 11 stuck out his tongue and gently closed the door. Leaning against the door, an 11 has only one word in his mind: beauty. Damn. Angzi found that she was suddenly brainwashed by the beauty of the girl next door called Abby. The beauty who is full of the right mind welcomes readers to come and read. The latest, fastest, and hottest serial works are all at mobile phone users, please go to read. Super Role Player. Author, Yuan-San Buletinji. Chapter 22. In the morning, Angzi woke up from her sleep, put on her clothes, and looked towards the door next door. There was no movement, as if the beauty of yesterday appeared out of thin air, but today she disappeared out of thin air. Today is the beginning of the preseason game. Due to the suspension, the NBA has only scheduled 2 preseason games this season. The Spurs will face the Houston Rockets at home and away on December 19 and December 22, respectively. And today is December 19, the Spurs will go to Houston first, to challenge the Houston Rockets away. After jogging all the way to the training hall, Angzi packed up things and got his number 7 jersey in the official game by the way, then took his own bag and Manu Ginobili's bag and got on the team bus, and then passed the plane. Arrived in Houston. After a short break, in the afternoon, the Spurs came to the Rockets' home stadium, Toyota Center, ready to start the evening game. The Rockets this season looked miserable. Yao Ming, who had been waiting for several years, finally chose to retire due to injuries. So after retaining most of the players from last season, the Rockets lineup looks like a lottery. The team, Kevin Martin and Luis Scola are the two biggest players on this team. Although the hopeless Houston Rockets still get the attention of the Chinese market, their prospects are already at a loss. The attendance rate of the Toyota Center shows this. When the Yami combination was still in the league, the attendance rate of the Toyota Center could reach more than 90%, but now, the start of a long-lost preseason game, the attendance rate of the Toyota Center there is at most 60% left, and many Chinese fans even show up. They are wearing Spurs number 7 jerseys, obviously coming for Angzi. In the visiting team's locker room, the game is about to begin. Popovich changed his joking attitude and became serious. Before the start of the game, quickly set up the tactics of the game. Although this game is a preseason, it is an opportunity for you to prove yourself. If you want to get a place in the new season, you have to play this game well. We insisted on using our 4 sets of offensive tactics in the game and played more rotations in defense. Then the starters of this game: point guard Tony Parker, shooting guard Danny Green, small forward Kawhi Leonard, power forward Tim Duncan, center Thiago Splitter. Play well. In the first game, Angzi's role is a substitute. He doesn't know if he can get playing time, but if you want to come to the preseason, everyone will get a chance, right? Came to the court, and after warming up, the game officially began. Sitting on the bench, Angzi looked around. To his surprise, many Chinese fans wearing Spurs number 7 jerseys appeared on the sidelines. Well, maybe this is the privilege of the Chinese. When he was just a rookie player, there are fans wearing their own jerseys on the sidelines. The game started. The Rockets started with point guard Kyle Lowry, shooting guard Kevin Martin, small forward Chase Budinger, power forward Luis Scola and center Samuel Davenport. Greg Popovich stood on the sidelines to supervise the battle with a cold face. Although it was a preseason, Popovich still attached great importance to the game. Thiago Splitter won the jump ball, and the Spurs immediately began their offense. Tony Parker made a two-handed gesture, which is about to play the second tactic. Tony Parker cut in with the ball, and Danny Green on one side quickly cut out of the arc after a cross screen. It took away the defense of Luis Scola and Kevin Martin. Tony Parker made a pass, Tim Duncan made a 45-degree shot and made a shot. The Spurs scored 2 points first. Then, the Rockets attacked, Danny Green clinging to Kevin Martin, who was holding the ball, Danny Green, Kawhi Leonard, and Tim Duncan guarding the inside. The Spurs defense looked on paper very sturdy. Just like that, after playing more than half of the first half, the Spurs led by 56-35 by 21 points. Opposite, the rookie coach Kevin McHale, who coached for the first time, shook his head helplessly and called a timeout. Popovich also retired from the sidelines holding his chest. He has changed players several times until now, but Angzi has never gotten a chance to play. This timeout, after the Spurs gained such a big lead, it was obvious that they were about to change players again. And, you go on the field and play the position of shooting guard, Richard is on the field and play the position of small forward, Corey, you are also on the field and play the point guard. Sure enough, Popovich soon announced that he would change 3 people. Angzi played as a shooting guard. Richard Jefferson, who was relegated to the bench because of Kawhi Leonard's berth this season, came off the bench as a small forward, and Corey Joseph played against TJ Ford. The game restarted and Angzi finally stood on the NBA court. Angzi was a little bit emotional. Although it was only a preseason, he had to do his best if he wanted to get a place in the new season. On the sidelines, Mike Budenholzer, who was still talking and laughing with Popovich, suddenly frowned. He glanced at the Spurs lineup and said, "Greg, don't you think the team is lacking now? The inside line? The outside line has been changed twice, but the inside line can only use Tim and Thiago. If this continues, Tim will be tired." Popovich nodded and sighed, "Yeah, Duyuan is getting fat again this season. He can't play for the time being. Although Matt is an inside line, his role in the team is more like an outside line. The newcomer Eek, the strength is not up to the requirements, maybe we have to trade. Popovich narrowed his eyes and looked at Angzi and Richard Jefferson on the court, thoughtfully. Angzi also had the dream of becoming an NBA star as soon as he debuted, but he knows that those dreams will only appear in some novels or movies. With his current strength, he should be an honest role player. The Rockets attacked as soon as they came on the court. Kevin Martin took the ball and passed the half court, and Angzi posted it. As a professional defensive player, Angzi has naturally studied the information of every player he might be against. Kevin Martin, who has excellent shooting and breakthrough, is extremely good at fouling, but has poor physical fitness. So when defending Kevin Martin, Angzi directly posted it, using his body to make it difficult for Kevin Martin to make technical moves, and then he had to reach out less to prevent being cheated by his opponent for fouling. Holds tightly to Kevin Martin, giving no chance to his opponent. Soon, Kevin Martin had to pass the ball. He passed the ball to the substitute point guard Goran Dragic, who just came on the court. Off the court, Popovich nodded with satisfaction. Ang's defense is still great, he can play more in the new season, but Mike, the offensive training for him still can't stop, we are now an offense. The defensive team is already very small. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Super Role Player. Author, Yuen San Buletinji. Chapter 23. On the offensive end, although Angzi's team training games are often intercepted by Kawhi Leonard, in the real game, not everyone is Kawhi Leonard's, so when Corey Joseph signaled to play 2 and 11 didn't worry at all when it came to tactics. Corey Joseph cut in with the ball, and after making a cross screen with Angzi, Angzi cut out in an arc and then received a pass from Corey Joseph. Then he dribbled the ball a bit crappy and cut in. Succeeded in. Richard Jefferson cut through the arc, but Chandler Parsons, who defended him, did not leave with him. Instead, he surrounded Angzi with Kevin Martin. Outside, there was an empty seat in front of Richard Jefferson. Angzi immediately passed the ball, Richard Jefferson received the ball, made a three-pointer, and hit. In this way, Angzi played the role of a role player, cutting in with the ball, shorting, defending hard, and shooting three-pointers. At the end of a preseason game, Angzi also got 11 minutes of playing time and scored 6 points, 1 rebound, 2 assists, 1 block, and 2 steals. His performance was pretty good, especially on the defensive end. He was not shy about Kevin Martin, a scorer who had a season average of 20 plus per game. On the way back to San Antonio, Greg Popovich and the team general manager R.C. Buford communicated quietly. "Robert, what do you think? A deal? Don't you wait anymore? Shouldn't you wait to see the situation?" R.C. Buford hesitated. "Wait then, but you can look for someone now, because we are definitely going to trade, and the inside line is too short of people." Angzi dragged her tired body back to the apartment where she lived, but as soon as the elevator door opened, Angzi was stunned. At the entrance of the elevator, a graceful figure appeared in front of Angzi, and it was the beautiful blonde woman Abby next door. She seemed to be drunk, lying on the floor at the entrance of the elevator, with curly hair scattered on the floor. Her snow-white face was flushed, and she was drinking too much, and her two white, tender little arms were about to jump tightly. The two white rabbits that came out seemed very cold. Angzi smiled. "Nonsense. It's winter in December, and everyone will be cold when sleeping on the floor outside in winter." Angzi was struggling, facing a drunk neighbor. He definitely couldn't ignore it, so after annoyed for a while, Angzi got started. "No, it should be said that I was looking for the key in Abby's pocket." Touched Abby's pocket several times, but Angzi didn't even touch the key, but it took a lot of money and made Angzi feel happy. But the key was not found, which made Angzi worry again. Don't care about it? Obviously not, because sleeping outside is sure to catch a cold. If he doesn't see it, it's okay to say it. If he sees it, he must take care of it. Then, I can only carry her to my own home. Angzi sighed, opened the door of her house, and then walked in with Abby in her arms. I have to say that although Abby is also 1.8 meters tall, he really has no weight. An 11 hugged him easily and threw it directly on his bed. Next, an 11 took off her clothes, and plunged into the sofa. Okay, although Angzi really wants to, he is not a beast that takes people at risk. The bachelor's apartment is very small, with the bed next to the sofa. Angzi tried to restrain herself, try her best not to let her eyes float there, and then close her eyes hard, wanting to fall asleep as soon as possible. But soon, Angzi couldn't stand it anymore. The body fragrance of beautiful neighbors kept coming from the big bed. Angzi felt that she was going crazy, and restrained herself for a while. Angzi decided to take a cold shower. The painful night passed quickly, and Angzi, who didn't fall asleep until the early hours of the morning, never woke up. Anyway, without training in the morning, he fell asleep comfortably. But the beautiful neighbor is different. After the hangover, she woke up early, and then suddenly found herself in a strange environment with a strange breath on the bed. She touched the clothes on her body vigilantly, and was relieved when she found that the clothes were in good condition. Then, she began to look at the house. Angzi's apartment was cleaned up by Angzi. There was no TV or computer. There was a big poster opposite the bed. It was a photo of Angzi's set makeup this year. She was wearing a Spurs number 7 jersey and held it with big hands. The basketball is shot facing the camera, looking very handsome. Next to the poster is a hanger. On the hanger is Angzi's number 7 jersey. Below the jersey is the basketball that Angzi stolen. A room for basketball lovers. Abby found that this room was full of San Antonio Spurs number 7 players, posters, jerseys, training uniforms, and even sneakers. So, she guessed, this is a room for basketball lovers. Walking outside the room, Abby immediately saw Angzi, who was sleeping on the sofa, and compared the posters. Abby confirmed that this is a basketball player's room. The sleeping Zhang Xiang is the number 7 of the Spurs. Angzi woke up from his sleep, and when he opened his eyes, he saw a beautiful face in front of his eyes, which shocked him. "Are you awake?" The beautiful face was covered with frost. An 11 nodded, his head became clearer. "This is asking myself if he wakes up is his neighbor, right? The face of the beautiful neighbor is still ugly. Where did you pick up my corpse yesterday?" "I picked up your corpse." An 11 looked blank, forgiving this little place. The man didn't understand these professional terms. The beauty had a black line, and she changed her way of asking, "I mean, where did you see me and then take me home?" "Oh, this, right at the elevator door. I saw you lying there when I got home." "Then you didn't do anything to me, did you?" "No, absolutely not." An 11 held up his hands and looked innocent. The beautiful neighbor breathed a sigh of relief, and his face looked much better. "That's good, thank you so much. Yesterday, you live on my doorstep. My name is Abby Hornacek. How about you?" "My name is Angzi, you can call me An." Angzi breathed a sigh of relief. After and introduced each other, Angzi finally understood the origin of his neighbor. It turned out that Abby Hornacek was a reporter from Fox Sports. He just applied to the above some time ago, hoping to work in Texas. Fox Sports accepted the application, and finally agreed to the application, and then Abby Hornacek came to San Antonio. Rented the apartment next door. But her father, Jeff Hornacek, was furious, because Jeff Hornacek wanted his daughter to work by his side instead of running to the distant Texas. Jeff Hornacek? Is the name familiar? Of course, don't you know him? He is now the shooting coach of the Jazz, Abi Hornacek explained with his lips poked. Angzi suddenly, oh, I see, Jeff Hornacek, super shooter, dead light gun. Hearing Angzi's father's nickname, Abi Hornacek curled his lips again. He wants me to work in Utah, but I don't want to. He and his mother always want to take care of me. They don't even allow dating. Last night was my first clubbing. It's shameful to say it, but it's clubbing. It feels really hilarious. Abi Hornacek couldn't help talking about his experience. Angzi also learned from Abi Hornacek and curled his Li super role player. Author, Yuen San Buletinji. Chapter 24. The exchange with Abi Hornacek was quite pleasant. I heard that Angzi had never been so long before. Abi seemed to have found a confidant, and the two soon became friends. Abi Hornacek asked Angzi to call her Abi, and he called Angzi An in a delicate voice, which made Angzi goosebumps. But in the afternoon, the Spurs resumed training, so Angzi said goodbye to Abi Hornacek, and trot to the training hall with the basketball he stolen the day before. Abi Hornacek is about to start working. After finally leaving her father Jeff Hornacek, Abi Hornacek can finally start her work in Texas. Whenever I think that Texas has 3 strong NBA teams and her neighbor is a rookie of the San Antonio Spurs, Abi Hornacek feels happy for a while. Of course, the happiest thing is that her parents finally can't control her. Angzi, who restarted training, was struggling because head coach Greg Popovich officially announced that from now on, the morning physical training will be cancelled and replaced by technical training for each player. For this reason, Popovich Vicky also assigned everyone's training tasks. For example, Kawhi Leonard continued to correct his shooting style, DeJuan Blair continued to lose weight, and so on. And Angzi was assigned the same task as Kawhi Leonard. It was also shooting. Now it's Angzi's turn to worry, shoot. If only 3-point shots are available, and 11 is not afraid of the existence of that magical jersey, but the technical training in the morning allows him to practice his shortcomings. How could it be possible to let Angzi go to practice the strengths that Popovich saw? What about 3 points? So the shooting training that Popovich said, if Angzi guesses well, it should be a mid-range shot. Angzi doesn't have the ability to make mid-range shots at all. No one is defensive to make a mid-range shot, and the shooting rate will not exceed 20%. In this case, how can Angzi not be guilty? How can it not be distressed? But Chip Engelland is a good shooting coach. In the afternoon, he ran to Angzi and said to Angzi, don't worry, step by step. From tomorrow on, I'll teach you how to make mid-shots. It doesn't matter in China. The important thing is that you have to study my method seriously. As long as you study it carefully, I guarantee that you can at least have an average CIC in the league. With Chip Engelland's assurance, N11 was relieved, but the shooting training on the second day still abused N11 half to death. He was unable to make all kinds of mid-range shots. N11 was mocked by several old Oilers in the team. After a long time, even Tim Duncan, who always didn't smile, and only Popovich could make a laugh, showed an imperceptible smile. Does that guy think of himself? Angzi guessed maliciously. Angzi knew that Tim Duncan used to be a swimmer. He didn't start playing basketball until he was 14 years old. It is estimated that he did not struggle with these basic trainings at that time. Over. On December 22, the Spurs' second preseason game, the opponent was the Rockets, but the battlefield was at home. Because they have already played once, both sides are very familiar with each other. In this game, Angzi got 17 minutes of playing time, which is a big improvement over the previous game. But Angzi knows that this improvement is only because Popovich doesn't want to waste energy on a preseason game, especially for opponents like the Rockets who have played once. In 17 minutes of playing time, Angzi scored 15 points, plus 5 rebounds, 3 assists, 2 steals, and 1 block. He performed well. And in this home game, Angzi's beautiful neighbor Abi Hornacek also went to the home to cheer for Angzi. He was able to get cheers from the beautiful women. Angzi was in a good mood and the next day of training was more motivated. After 2 preseason games, the NBA's new season was announced. After the suspension, there were only 66 games left in the 2011-2012 season. The NBA officially announced the schedule. People found that even if there were only 66 games left, there are still many schedules for the Devil, and there is even a new schedule called back-to-back-to-back. It represents 3 games for 3 consecutive days, which shows the horror of the schedule. As a result, the Spurs have been questioned a lot in the discussion of the hottest championship in the new season. People question whether the Spurs' current lineup is old, weak, and sick, and whether they can stick to the playoffs in the shrinking season of the Devils' schedule is a problem. Not to mention the finals. Therefore, the younger Heat and Thunder have become popular champions in people's minds. Before the start of the season, many reporters hoped to get the opportunity to visit the Spurs, and Abi Hornacek became the first reporter to successfully obtain the right to interview because of Angzi. Abi Hornacek entered the Spurs training hall with a video camera. The camera first took pictures of the black and white training hall, and then began the interview. The first interview must be the team's coach Greg Popovich. "Hello, little Abi, say hello to your father for me." Greg Popovich had known Abi Hornacek's identity for a long time, otherwise it would be difficult for Abi to get an interview with Angzi's introduction. Of the right. There is so little news about the Spurs every year, and it seems that the Spurs are so low-key. In fact, it is because the reporters can't get the right to interview the Spurs. Little Abi curled his lips, and then whispered back, "I see, Mr. Greg." Popovich smiled and said, "Then let's start the interview. Hey, Ann, is that girl your girlfriend? She looks really good." Dewan Blair approached with a lewd smile. N11 curled his lips, "Dewan, the coach will yell at you if you don't go to training." Dewan Blair shrank his neck and walked away immediately. Soon, Abi interviewed the entire Spurs, and the last interview was Angzi. Abi sat across from Angzi, holding the microphone, staring at Angzi with charming eyes. "And, thank you for winning this opportunity for me." N11 scratched his head, "No thanks. No, I have to thank you, so let me ask you to go clubbing in the evening." Speaking of clubbing, Abi's voice became quieter, and she seemed to be whispering to Angzi. N11 nodded helplessly. "Okay, then our interview will begin. The first question, Ann, your home country is China. Before you, Yao Ming was an NBA All-Star player. So is your goal to be like your predecessor? What about becoming an All-Star?" Abi Hornacek's interview was very unnutritive, but Angzi still answered one by one. After the interview, Angzi continued to go back to training. In the afternoon, when the training was over, Angzi took a shower and prepared to continue training. As a result, Abi jumped out again. "Hey, Ann. We should set off. Book friends are welcome to visit and read. The latest, fastest, and hottest serial works are all at for mobile phone users. Please go to read. Super Role Player. Author, Yuen San-Bu-Letinji. Chapter 25. This chapter is a little bit so you can skip it if you don't like it. Angzi followed Abi Hornacek to the city center of San Antonio with a bitter face. What Angzi did not expect was that there is still such a noisy place in this seemingly low-key and quiet city. The bar is very noisy, and crazy. Angzi has a kind of wanting to retreat. Unexpectedly, Abi directly grabbed Angzi's arm, and Angzi's slippery hands were tightly gripped. "It's okay. And, there are a lot of clubs among professional players. Even your team's Tim Duncan has clubs. What are you afraid of?" Abi comforted Angzi, and then pulled Angzi to a small corner of the bar. "Sit down. What to drink?" "Whiskey." Abi turned to look at Angzi. Angzi immediately shook his head. "No, I won't drink anymore. let's have a drink. How can I come to the bar without drinking? Then whiskey. Angzi couldn't stop him, so Abby ordered Angzi a glass of whiskey. Noisy heavy metal music echoed in his ears. Angzi didn't know what was going on, so he drank wine, and the drink was out of control. "An, you are awesome, I didn't expect you to drink so much." On the street of San Antonio, two drunks supported each other. "You are great too," Abby and 11 squinted her eyes, her face glowing red, and a little drunk, but fortunately she was still awake. "Hey, your hand touched my chest," Abby, who was completely drunk, suddenly called out, her speech still a bit unclear. Angzi helplessly changed her posture quickly. "Don't move, how about? Is my chest big?" Angzi remained silent in the face of such blatant flirting with Abby. "Do you want to touch it?" Drunk Abby continued to tease Angzi. Angzi's breathing became heavier, and the hand holding Abby shook suddenly. "If you want to touch it, don't worry, I won't say anything." All the way I heard Abby's noisy noise. Angzi supported Abby and returned to the apartment building. After groping for Abby for a while, Angzi sullenly found that this second product didn't seem to have the key. Looking at this unconscious second-class beauty, Angzi reluctantly dragged her into her house again. Angzi threw Abby onto her bed, and she fell asleep on the bed too much. Looking at the ceiling in a daze, Angzi felt as if he had fallen, and even learned to drink. Is it really good for professional players to be like this? His mind was dizzy, and an 11 just fell asleep slowly. The early morning sunlight came into Angzi's small room, and Angzi, who was gradually regaining consciousness, suddenly felt a slickness on his arm, perhaps a little fat. An 11 was startled and opened his eyes suddenly. After opening, an 11 only saw Abby staring at herself with a pair of twinkling and charming big eyes, and his face was slightly red. Looking at the posture of the two again, Angzi held Abby tightly with one hand, and put the other hand on Abby's chest. And Abby's two hands were tightly wrapped around Angzi's waist, and one leg reached Angzi's body. This posture, how ambiguous and ambiguous. Angzi was so scared that he let go of his two hands and raised them high. "But I did not expect that." Abby pursed his mouth. "It's useless to let go, you have to be responsible to me. An 11 has a black line on his face, but I didn't do anything." "Who said you didn't do it?" Angzi helplessly accepted Abby Hornacek's "you have to be responsible to me" brainwashing, and then the two got up from the bed. Abby Hornacek suddenly rushed to kiss Angzi. Angzi was stunned for a moment, and Abby Hornacek stared at Angzi and said, "I want you to be my boyfriend," and Angzi was stunned. Abby Hornacek's voice was louder by a decibel, and he said, "I'm in love with you," and Angzi doesn't know what to say. When a big beauty with sleepy eyes and beautiful blonde hair keeps shouting at you, "I love you. I love you," everyone will be ashamed. Angzi, this is normal phenomenon. But Abby Hornacek was also a bit tigerish. Seeing an 11 staying in place, she didn't react at all. She rushed up and kissed an 11's mouth. So an 11 was emotional and kissed fiercely. Following fascinating steps, Angzi trot all the way to the training hall and was almost late. He was still immersed in the kiss of Abby in the morning. He didn't expect that he would get out of the single a few days after knowing Abby. The boldness and enthusiasm of American girls can really scare people to death, and the speed of entering the state is too fast a little. But, he likes it very much. In the morning's training, an 11 was very excited. He had a headache in the middle distance, and he actually made a few consecutive goals. Such a big improvement made shooting coach Chip Engelland laugh. In the afternoon, during the tactical training, the excited Angzi unexpectedly abused Kawhi Leonard once again, and was shocked to break his teeth. But in the evening, Angzi had no choice to practice more, and he was not even the last to leave the arena. But before leaving, Angzi still didn't forget to steal a basketball with him, so he could practice dribbling while walking on the road. This guy, Did not practice extra today. Mike Budenholzer watched Angzi pick up a basketball and ran. Thought that Angzi had been insisting on extra training before, and suddenly he was a little surprised. It may be in love. Children in love are all excited and hope to see their girl soon, Chip Engelland said with emotion. Then Mike Budenholzer glanced at him, and Chip explained seriously, I was like that back then. Just like Chip Engelland said, Angzi really hoped to meet Abby earlier. After the relationship was established in the morning, Angzi thought about what Abby was doing when he went back in the evening. Can I get another kiss after I go back? Soon, all of this has the answer. As soon as Angzi opened the door of the apartment, and Abby rushed towards him, and immediately sent Angzi a kiss without disappointing Angzi. Abby, what's the matter? But when Angzi saw a mess in her apartment, there was a pile of pink clothes, a pile of high heels there, and a pair of silk stockings there. Stacked neatly on the bed in Angzi, he was a little strange, pointing to the clothes all over the floor and asked. Abby held Angzi's arms, pressed against Angzi's chest, and said with a greasy voice, I'm moving over to live with you, so I can save a rent. Nest grass. Is this cohabitation? Angzi couldn't believe it, but he was still willing to accept the result. When the old Hornacek was still sulking about giving birth to his daughter in Utah, what he didn't know was that his daughter was already in love. And they have also lived together in a flash. Once the old Hornacek knows, Angzi may have to peel off. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Super Role Player. Author, Yuen San Buletinji. Chapter 26. On December 25, 2011, the shrinking season officially opened, and the league ushered in 5 duels on that day. The Miami Heat won the championship in the first game against the Mavericks in the finals of last season. The upstart Clippers faced the Warriors. Last season MVP Rose led the Bulls against the Lakers. The Celtics faced the Knicks and Magic. Faced with the Thunder. On the opening day, the Spurs have no game schedule. They will not have the first game of the season until December 26, an away challenge to the Grizzlies. I have to say that the league staff who arranges the schedule is also a genius. The Heat's opponent in the first game is the Mavericks, who lost their finals last season, and the Spurs' opponent is the Grizzlies, who gave them a Black 8 miracle last season. The opener of the game has a lot to watch, and the slots are full. It can be said that the grievances of last season have been brought to the extreme. On the morning of the 25th, the Spurs set off for Memphis. Greg Popovich refused all media access. The Spurs started preparing for the first game of the season with peace of mind. The quietness inside the Spurs does not mean the peace of the outside world. For the new season, major US media and even foreign sports media have reported and predicted. ESPN placed the Spurs 4th in the Western Conference in their preseason forecast, behind the Thunder, Lakers, and Clippers. ESPN expert Mark Stein believes that the Spurs will have to face the Devils' schedule when the main force is 1 year older. Tests, coupled with the fact that the Spurs not only didn't have any strong signings this season, but instead sent away the team's chief backup point guard George Hill for a number 15 rookie. In the new season, San Antonio will not have a point guard who can replace the French sports car at a critical moment, and their inside line does not even have a pure center. 2 preseason games, the Spurs have been using Tim Duncan, and Thiago Splitter went to the top center position. What's even more embarrassing is that the Spurs do not even have Tim Duncan and Thiago Split substitutes. This makes people question the Spurs after the start of the free market on December 9. After they signed the 3 rookies in a hurry, they only signed the injured TJ Ford and the embarrassed Ike Diogu, so they made up the 15-man roster. What about the depth of the lineup? Mark Stein believes that the Spurs in the new season will not have any lineup depth. Angzi, who has been using his mobile phone to scan the news, can only sneer. Angzi has found some domestic news reports. Because of Yao Ming's retirement and the US League has not returned to the NBA due to injury, Anzi has become the only attraction in China. Tencent Sports also made a special topic on Anzi. They believe that based on Anzi's performance in the CBA death prevention J.R. Smith, Anzi can at least get a certain amount of playing time in the new season, and Tencent Sports also quoted ESPN reports, saying the depth of the team's lineup is extremely poor. If Anzi can perform well and seize the opportunity, he can even become a member of the regular rotation lineup. Regarding domestic news reports, Anzi can only look at it. Although the NBA has been in China for many years, the domestic awareness of the NBA is still very small, or it is still in its infancy. For Anzi like himself, it can be exaggerated. Just exaggerate. As for why the basketball vanguard previously sang the opposite, Anzi speculated that they might want to set a counter-example to win the favor of domestic fans. The bus arrived at the hotel, Anzi was still reading the news. "And, what are you doing?" Manu Ginobili leaned over. "Oh, are you watching the news?" "Haha, rookie, I advise you to watch less. Now, bring me your bag." Anzi stretched his waist and replied, "Manu, you don't understand, I just like to read these news reports. It looks very interesting." "Hey, when you behave badly, you won't think that way." Seeing Anzi help himself with the bag, Manu Ginobili stopped and continued to talk about this issue with Anzi. Anzi didn't take Manu Ginobili's words to heart and did not perform well. Watching these news when performance is bad is another way of thinking. But Anzi doesn't even know if he can get the chance to perform, so how can he care about it? Because of helping Manu carry the bags, Anzi and Manu lived in the same room at night. As soon as he entered the room, Manu took out his mobile phone and listened to the music. Anzi heard from other teammates that in his spare time, Manu loves to listen to the Latin music, so he didn't bother Manu, changed into a training uniform, and went out. The hotel where the Spurs stayed in Memphis has a gym. An 11 came to this gym wearing a Spurs training suit. One after another bench press, Anzi feels very refreshed, a feeling full of strength all over the body. "Wow! Look at that guy. He has been doing bench presses," someone yelled quietly not far away. 4 times, it seems to be at the 150 kilograms level. It is very powerful. Anzi only did 4 bench presses, and he was really out of strength. He rested for a while and then started doing other exercises. He started to squat. Take a look. The 2 people not far away stared at Anzi, and they were really startled by Anzi's bench press. A moment later, when Anzi came out from under the barbell, the 2 people who had been observing from a distance opened their mouths in surprise. 7 times in the 100 kilograms class, it is very strong. If it is an extreme squat, he should be able to reach nearly 300 kg, the youngest of the 2 directly estimated Anzi's squat data. "A good seedling, go," the older one rushed towards Anzi without hesitation. Anzi was about to run for a while, when he was stopped by 2 small black men. "Hello, introduce yourself." "My name is Martin Bunker. I am a boxing coach." The older one introduced himself. "Boxing coach," an 11 looked suspiciously at this middle-aged black man who looked really strong. But with this suspicious look, Martin Bunker thought Anzi was questioning his identity. He hurriedly dragged the young black man out. "He? Don't you know him?" Anzi was even more confused now. He shook his head. "I don't know, is it?" Martin Bunker was defeated by Anzi. "Floyd Mayweather? You don't know?" Anzi shook his head again. Martin Bunker doesn't know what to say, and Floyd Mayweather is even more embarrassed. He has been in this country for so many years, and there is really nothing in the land of the United States. People said they didn't know him. Okay, let's not care about that much. I want to ask, have you practiced boxing before? Anzi shook his head again, as if he could only shake his head. That's okay. With your physical condition, "It's still too late to start practicing now," Martin Bunker whispered, as if to comfort himself. But he immediately reacted and looked at Angzi. "Do you want to practice boxing? With your physical condition, if you contact boxing, you can become the world's strongest boxing champion, just like him, Mayweather." Angzi was a little bit dumbfounded at once, only then did he understand why this black uncle came to him. He wanted to practice boxing? He refused without thinking. "Mr. Martin Bunker, I wonder if you pay attention to my clothes?" Martin Bunker stunned, and Mayweather reminded him, "San Antonio Spurs training uniform, this Asian is a basketball player." Martin Bunker was suddenly disappointed. It turns out that this good seed is already an athlete, but he is in another field. "Then I'm sorry we interrupted." Martin Bunker apologized and was about to leave. Angzi smiled and nodded, but Floyd Mayweather did not leave directly. He pretended to look at Angzi viciously and said, "This is the first time I have met someone who doesn't know me, so we must get to know me." Book friends are welcome to visit and read. The latest, fastest, and hottest serial works are all at mobile phone users. Please go to read. Super Role Player. Author, Yuen San Buletinji. Chapter 27. Angzi and Floyd Mayweather ran and chatted slowly on the treadmill. After chatting, Angzi learned that Martin Bunker came to Memphis with Mayweather to participate in a boxing Grand Prix. As a result, I saw Angzi showing such a high level of physical fitness in the hotel. Seeing the joy of hunting, I wanted Angzi. Practice boxing with him. Angzi is also very helpless. He knows that his physical fitness is very strong, but he did not expect that there are people in the boxing world who can see him, and he has been practicing basketball since he was a child. Now it is impossible for him to change his boxing practice. Chatted with Mayweather for a while, and after leaving contact information with each other, Angzi checked the time. It was late and went back to the room. On the evening of December 26, the Spurs away game against the Grizzlies was about to begin. An 11 took his and Manu's bags from the bus and walked through the safe passage to the visiting team's locker room. This game, Let's Kill Memphis, the players just sat down and began to change their jerseys, and Popovich stood in the middle of the locker room. "Last season they killed us in 8th place. Completed the Black 8 miracle. This season, we have to win all the games against them, and we have to take revenge. No matter who it is, you have to take you out of this game. The best state." After everyone changed their jerseys, Popovich began to announce the starting lineup for this game. Angzi knew that this had nothing to do with him for the time being, so he didn't care. Then the starting lineups for today's game are Tony Parker, Manu Ginobili, Richard Jefferson, Dewayne Blair, and Tim Duncan. This is our lineup from last season. I hope you can show a different performance from last season and defeat the opponent. Kawhi Leonard did not start, and Thiago Splitter, who was still soy sauce last season, did not start. The 5 players who started were the absolute main players of the Spurs last season. So, only through the starting lineup, Greg Popovich has already set the tone for this game. In the arena, the lights dimmed suddenly. As the home team, the Grizzlies players played in the loud shouts of the DJ and the cheers and screams of the fans. Rudy Gay, Mark Gasol, Mike Conley, Tanya Lun, the last player to play is Zach Randolph. Then the Spurs players came out. The DJ's voice was much quieter. Tim Duncan was the first to appear. The DJ's voice was immediately overwhelmed by the booing of the fans. When Angzi came out, the boo was much smaller, but he was taken aback by an avid Grizzlies fan next to the player tunnel. When he ran out of the player tunnel, the fan suddenly stretched out his head and his own with both hands. He yelled towards Angzi, "You are defeated. You will lose in this game." Angzi was speechless. It seems that Grizzlies fans still remember the victories and successes of last season. After a short warm-up, the game started soon. The Spurs put in their predetermined starting lineup. On the Grizzlies side, the starting point guard is Mike Conley, the starting shooting guard Tony Allen, the starting small forward Rudy Gay, the starting power forward Zach Randolph and the starting lineup. Center Marc Gasol. A whistle sounded, the game officially began. Marc Gasol won the jump ball, Mike Conley advanced to the front court with the ball, and then stopped and began to slowly organize a half-court attack. Last season, with Lionel Hollins taking office, his defensive transformation for the Grizzlies was successful. The inside Twin Towers and the outside line Tony Allen joined, the Grizzlies have one of the toughest defenses in the league. Relying on defense, the Grizzlies made a breakthrough in the playoffs. Black beat the Spurs 8th and successfully entered the Western Conference semifinals. The Grizzlies' team style Angzi also knows a little bit. The Grizzlies' current style of play mainly relies on defense. On the offensive end, the Grizzlies are better at positional warfare. They like to slow down the game and slowly grinding positions, through this slow-paced offensive and defensive, gradually find your own rhythm. Mike Conley dribbled the ball for a while, and then Angzi saw that Marc Gasol was in a better position in the post. Mike Conley passed the ball and Marc Gasol hit Dewayne Blair with his back. A 2m16, an actual height of only 2m, Marc Gasol's back hit quickly achieved results. Abruptly back to the top, Marc Gasol got a shot space, turned around and made a jumper, but didn't make it. At the beginning of the game, Marc Gasol's hands were still cold. Although he didn't make it, an 11 still wanted to say that the Grizzlies' offensive strategy is right. Focusing on Dewayne Blair's height will always achieve a certain effect. The rebound was taken by Tim Duncan. The Spurs attacked. Parker asked for the ball from Duncan and advanced to the front court. He greeted him. An 11 looked at it. This time the Spurs are going to play the number 3 tactic, which is a more inclination. The tactics that Duncan played. Tony Parker and Manu Ginobili made a cross screen, the ball reached Manu's hand, Manu cut through the arc, Duncan quickly raised the high position, another cross screen. At this time, the ball was in Duncan's hands. The Spurs did a dazzling pass and cut, and the Grizzlies quickly got into a mess. Duncan took the ball for 2 dribbles and made a gesture to make a shot. Marc Gasol and Zach Randolph rushed over, but Duncan made a fake move and hit the earth one by one. Dewayne Blair on the inside was unguarded. In the case of, cut into the penalty area and dunked directly after getting the ball. 2 minutes. Then, in the next defensive round, in Popovich's loud yelling, the Spurs increased the intensity of the rotation. This time Marc Gasol wanted to repeat the same trick and beat Dewayne Blair on the back, but the Spurs had already given no chance. Up. The Spurs quickly switched defenses. Duncan faced Marc Gasol. Faced with Duncan, who was veteran, tall and not disadvantaged, Marc Gasol had no choice but to pass back. The Grizzlies' low-post tactics failed. After 8 minutes in the first quarter, the Grizzlies' offensive end was misfired and could only rely on Zach Randolph's strong fight against Dewayne Blair. The defensive end could not prevent the Spurs' old-fashioned pass and cooperation. Scored 16 points. As a last resort, Lionel Hollins called a timeout, and the Grizzlies had to adjust their offense. After a pause, Popovich was very satisfied with the performance of the starting 5 Tigers. After a few praises, he announced a substitution. Kawhi Leonard replaced Richard Jefferson, Danny Green replaced Manu Ginobili, Thiago Splitter replaced Dewayne Blair, and apparently Popovich was next. I want Duncan and Parker to bring the new together. After the substitution, the Spurs lineup was younger and more reasonable. The Grizzlies also made some adjustments. They replaced O.J. Mayo and strengthened their outside offense. Super Role Player. Author, Yuen Sanbuletnji. Chapter 28. Throughout the first half, the Spurs occupied all the advantages on the court. Lionel Hollins kept arranging troops and generals, but he couldn't prevent the Spurs' passing tactics. However, Lionel's several waves of adjustments are still useful, At least after replacing OJ Mayo, the Grizzlies' offense has recovered slightly, and they are slowly able to attack the Spurs. Throughout the first half, Anzi could only sit at the end of the bench. Although he was on the active list in this game, there were too many players ranked before Anzi in rotation. There was Manu Ginobili on the shooting guard, Billy, Danny Green, and Gary Neal, as well as Richard Jefferson and Kawhi Leonard at the small forward position. It can be said that Anzi may not get even 1 minute of playing time in this game. After the intermission, the Spurs consciously accelerated their offensive rhythm. The game gradually lost its suspense. The Spurs' new offensive tactics were too difficult to defend. If the Spurs' offensive tactics last season were only a preliminary version, and they were defeated by the Grizzlies because of their unskilledness, then the past tactics offered by the Spurs this season have basically reached the perfect state for the Grizzlies. For a team that likes to grind positions, the Spurs' passing tactics are undoubtedly their nightmare. By the 8th minute of the third quarter, the Spurs had led by 27 points, but Popovich did not intend to substitute, and Lionel Hollins on the opposite side did not intend to surrender. As a result, at the end of the third quarter and the fourth quarter, Anzi was in a tormented wait until the end of the game. He could not get the half of the playing time. The Spurs finished the game with the main force, and the game ended. By the time, the score had become 122-89, and the Spurs beat the Grizzlies by 33 points. Anzi was not happy because he didn't even get a single minute of playing time in this game. He could only sit at the end of the bench and watch his teammates fight on the court. This feeling was obviously very uncomfortable. But on the way back to the locker room, an 11 figured out, who is he? He is just a rookie in the second round, and only the 59th pick in the second round. Want to get playing time? It depends on your own efforts. Where's the playing time without hard work? Moreover, Anzi's performance in the team's training games was not very good. It can only be regarded as average. In the same position of the team, it can only be said to be better than James Anderson, and almost like Gary Neal. With such a performance, how could Anzi squeeze out those teammates ahead of him? So, after thinking about it carefully, an 11 also figured it out. After I figured it out, an 11 only thought that he had to work harder, not only to work hard in the game, but to return to San Antonio, but also to work hard in the team training. Trying to squeeze the players in front of him. In the first game, Anzi sat on the bench. The domestic reporters who came to interview didn't know how to report on the game, until an old colleague who came with him said, "It's not easy to want news, just write if Anzi is not strong enough, can it become the mascot of the team?" Suddenly reminded a few young reporters who had just come to the United States. They suddenly realized that they immediately paid their respects to the senior in the industry. However, among this group of reporters, a young reporter with the Hupa Sports logo frowned. She felt that the old reporter's approach was wrong. Anyway, Anzi was included in the team's 12-man roster. This shows that Anzi is still very hopeful to play next. The old reporter's approach is obviously wrong. So, in the group of Chinese reporters who were in the press release after the match, this reporter from Hupa made a different choice from most of them. Her news headline was, "Anzi entered the team activation list in the first game of the season, 48 minutes failed to appear." Looking back at other reporters, they all said, "Anziku sits on the bench and may become the team mascot." What's more, he also hit the following headline, "The men's basketball outside hopes to become the next Sun Yu, who is even worse than Sun Yu before a minute." The press release was sent back to China in this way, and after a little review by the chief editors of major portals, it was put on the front page of the NBA version. But in West Lake City, Hupa Sports headquarters, the editor-in-chief Zhang Duoan frowned. "This Annie, what the is it? Others are saying that Nziku is sitting on the bench and may become the next Sun Yu. Look at her content and title. There is no topicality at all." The head of the NBA sector, Yang Bolun, who sat opposite him, quickly explained, "Mr. Zhang, it may be that Annie has some other information in the United States. This news has already been posted. Let's do this for now. Maybe there will be a reaction later. Turn, I think, our Hyopa news is like this, don't pick up saliva, so that we can follow up in the follow-up." Zhang Duowen nodded helplessly, "It can only be this way." After failing to get playing time in the first game, Angzi worked harder. On the night of returning to San Antonio, Angzi even ignored Abby's temptation to sacrifice himself and went to the team's training hall alone to start additional training. "I have to practice. If the ball handling ability can improve faster, that would be great. There is also the mid-range shot. If these two can improve quickly, I can rush to the front of the rotation lineup." In Angzi's apartment, Abby sat on the bed alone, pouting, thinking that Angzi came back from away, definitely couldn't wait to see him, but as soon as he came back, he went to the arena for extra training. "What's the matter?" Abby turned on the TV and browsed casually unhappily. The sports channel flashed past, and Abby hesitated for a while before pressing the back button. Because during the Spurs game against the Grizzlies, Abby Hornacek went to Dallas to do an interview about the Mavericks, so she didn't watch the Spurs game and didn't know the situation. In this way, sulking Angzi, Abby began to watch the Spurs post-match report against the Grizzlies. When she saw that Angzi didn't get a bit of playing time, Abby suddenly understood why Angzi had to practice more when she came back. Now, Abby suddenly felt a little guilty, plus a little bit of pain for Angzi. So she got up quickly, got dressed, and left the apartment. In the training hall, when Angzi had just made 100 mid-range shots, Abby opened the door cautiously and walked in. Angzi turned her head, and saw a long-legged beautiful girl walking in with 2 bottles of water. Angzi smiled suddenly. He thought of a joke, so he smiled more happily. "What are you laughing at? Are you thirsty? Come and drink water," Abby fainted. Angzi played off the basketball, wiped his sweat with his jersey, pointed to the water in Abby's hand and smiled and said, "I'm thirsty, but this thing doesn't quench my thirst." "Ah. What about quenching your thirst?" "Gatorade," Abby was frightened, thinking that he had bought the wrong water. "I think your saliva must quench your thirst," and 11 joked seriously, and then kissed it all at once, and at the same time she kissed it, she thought, if the story is changed to this, it will definitely be more abused dog. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Super Role Player. Author, Yuan-san Buletinji. Chapter 29. The Spurs' next opponent is the Clippers. This time they are playing at home, and before the game, they still have 2 days off. The Spurs, who have always rejected the media, are open on this day of rest. After all, the NBA has mandatory requirements for media interviews. Each team has to set a specific day as a media day, and reporters can stay here, in and out of the arena or training hall at will, as long as it does not disturb the team's training. The Spurs, who opened up for media interviews, soon discovered how popular they are. The reporters found their targets one after another and were ready to ask a lot of fun. Greg Popovich blew a whistle. "Okay, let's accept the interview first, we will officially start training after 8 o'clock. The implication is that the reporters can only interview until 8 o'clock. They checked the time and it was 7:30, so everyone was even more crazy. In front of Angzi, besides 4 or 5 reporters from China, there is also a beautiful girl with long legs, Abby Hornacek. This grinning little fairy tossed with Angzi until 1 or 2 points last night. It is full of moisturizing charm, which is very charming. The interviews conducted by domestic reporters were very unnutritive. They just asked Angzi about his life habits in San Antonio, or his relationship with his teammates, what he thinks of Tim Duncan, what he thinks of Popovich, what he thinks of Manu Ginobili, what is Lee's personality, What's Tony Parker's opinion of Tony Parker? Anyway, there is no question related to Angzi. Almost all of them are asking other Spurs players through Angzi's mouth. However, a reporter from Sina Sports raised a question, but Angzi was a little uncomfortable. Angzi, you didn't get a minute of playing time in the last game. If this situation continues, would you choose to return to China? N11 glanced at the reporter card of the Sina Sports reporter, Yang Fan? Angzi remembered the name all at once. How do you know this situation will continue? N11 returned back mercilessly. He knew very well that this reporter named Yang Fan asked such a question, obviously unkind. Yang Fan's face was blue and white. He didn't expect that it was just such a small problem, and he was choked by Angzi. In fact, Yang Fan is the old reporter who taught in Memphis before. This time, he came to San Antonio to make Angzi not get any playing time, may become the mascot of the Spurs, and even have to return to China in the future. Fact, that's why he asked the question just now. N11 looked at several other reporters again. A reporter with the Tiger Sports logo in front of him attracted N11. It was a female reporter with the appearance of a young woman. N11 indicated that she could ask questions. Hello, N11, this is Hyopu Sports reporter Annie. What I want to ask is, what are your expectations for your future in the NBA? Regarding this question, N11 nodded in satisfaction. This is like a problem. What are those just now? I have been asking my teammates without asking myself. The reporter from Sina Sports is even more hateful and wants to dig for myself. Pit. I think at this stage, my primary goal is definitely to get a certain amount of playing time. In the future, I hope I can become an NBA All-Star. After answering this question, Angzi ended the interview and went back to training. Because Angzi has already mastered the basics of CIC, Chip Engelland has been focusing on coaching Leonard on the other side for the past 2 days, so Angzi's morning training it was spent alone, with only one caddy to help pick up the ball. What Angzi didn't know was that the Sina Sports reporter Yang Fan hated Angzi. After the interview, the reporter named Yang Fan immediately concocted a press release and sent it back. When the Spurs started training, Yang Fan's press release was in the hands of the editor-in-chief of Sina Sports. Sina Sports still attaches great importance to Angzi, the only Chinese player currently developing in the NBA, so they specially sent Yang Fan, a veteran reporter. But looking at the press release Yang Fan just sent back, Sina Sports editor-in-chief Yi frowned. The only Chinese player in the NBA is understrength, arrogant, or has lost the trust of the coaching staff. Yi began to read the content of this report. He found that the news that Yang Fan sent back recently was not good for Angzi. In the first game of the regular season, Greg Popovich did not give Angzi any playing time even when the team had a big lead. This has to make people suspect that the only Chinese player in the NBA is currently on the team. Status. On December 27, the Spurs Media Day, we interviewed Angzi. When faced with reporters' questions, Angzi choked directly, but did not answer the reporters' questions directly, showing his arrogant side. During the training, Angzi also trained alone and silently, without any coach's guidance, and seemed to have lost the trust of the coaching staff. Yi looked at the end of this article, he gritted his teeth, fat. Let the people from the press department work quickly. Sina Sports staff quickly issued this report in accordance with Yi's instructions, but Yi thought about this press release secretly in his office. Based on his decades of experience in the industry, it is absolutely impossible for Angzi to do so early in the season. Lost the trust of the coaching staff, so the news sent back by Yang Fan can basically be concluded as fake news. But Yi still let people send out this news. Why? Yi made a good calculation. In any case, Yang Fan's news is very topical, and it will definitely attract a wave of attention when it is sent out. This is of great help to the increasingly sluggish Sina. After all, Traffic is only the uncle of the website. Even if this piece of news is false news, when the time comes, the blame will be directly on Yang Fan, isn't it alright? When Sina put their exclusive report on the homepage, domestic public opinion was immediately detonated. Angzi has lost the trust of the Spurs coaching staff because of arrogance. Will Angzi get any playing time with the Spurs? So the fans who read this report quickly gathered together and started a frenzied bombardment of Angzi. It's really difficult for everyone except Dao to gain a foothold in the NBA. This Angzi is really a waste thing. Can he be arrogant in Popovich's hands at his level? I really didn't expect Angzi to be such an arrogant person. Knowing people, knowing the face and not knowing the heart. All kinds of criticisms and even swearing-style sprays appeared under the exclusive report of Sina. Taiba and Hyopa forums also started a lot of discussions about Angzi. It seems that all of a sudden, Angzi has become a problem. Enterprising, heinous player. The fact that Chip Engelland was not accompanied during training in Angzi became the biggest evidence of the whole incident. If Angzi knew all this, I am afraid Daya would laugh out. Welcome to visit and read. The latest, the fastest and hottest serial works are all at for mobile phone users. Please go to read it. Super Role Player. Author, Yuan San Buletinji. Chapter 30. Yang Fan sent the report back to China, and Angzi saw it after training. The content of the report did not make an 11 very angry. He was just a little dumbfounded. What age is it now? There are still people who like to fabricate news. Are you not afraid to sue him? In fact, what Angzi doesn't know is that in the media, it is really difficult to win the rumors of reporters. This is created by the special domestic environment, and no one can change it. Now, facing the open rumors made by this reporter named Yang Fan, Angzi has only two options. One is to contact Zhang Mingji and ask them to help them dispel the rumors. However, looking at the rumors, it seems that even if they dispel the rumors, they are pale and weak. There is only one last way left, and that is to work hard to get playing time early. Angzi did not go to watch the domestic news anymore. You don't need to think about it. Now the major domestic media are definitely full of criticisms of themselves. Of course, the biggest basis for criticism is that ridiculous Angzi can only train alone. There is no coaching. In fact, among the major sports media in China, only Hyopu did not reprint this report, because they consulted Annie, who was far away in the United States, and learned that Angzi was not rejected by those American teammates, and Angzi itself did not appear arrogant. Afterwards, Hyopu's editor-in-chief Zhang Duowen breathed a sigh of relief. At the time, he felt that this report by Sina was false, and he immediately asked the people below not to reprint this report. As for the chaos on the Hyopu forum, he did not have much. Tube. After finishing the training, Angzi called Zhang Mingji, and Zhang Mingji said that they were dealing with the matter as early as the moment the article was published. Because Zhang Mingji and the others unconditionally believed in Angzi before getting along in the CBA. They knew that Angzi was definitely not the arrogant person mentioned in this report, so the first time Dao and Zhang Mingji were on Weibo, Angzi refuted the rumors and negotiated urgently with Sina. Since the domestic processing was already being done, Angzi did not care anymore. After the training, he returned home. Abby has nothing to do in the past 2 days, because Fox Sports has turned Abby into a team reporter for the Spurs. Of course, this is Abby's own application, in order to be able to see every game in Angzi. Go home and fry 2 small dishes for Abby. Abby, who is also a foodie, can only shout that it is delicious, and then send a kiss to repay Angzi. The sweet little life of the two goes on like this. Angzi, who was fascinated by the beauty's den at night, didn't know that the head coach Greg Popovich had already caused him a big trouble, and by the way he helped him solve a big trouble. The next morning, Angzi turned on the phone and checked the news as usual. Since yesterday afternoon, due to Dao and Zhang Mingji's refuting the rumors, the domestic scolding against Angzi has been much lower, but there are still many rhythmic ones. Maybe some people don't like Chinese basketball, so Angzi didn't pay attention anymore. In the domestic news, he directly opened the American media, and a piece of news suddenly popped out: the Spurs will be a surprise soldier in the next battle, and Popovich said that the Chinese rookie will become the Griffin Buster. Angzi was stunned all of a sudden. What's the situation? Chinese rookie? Angzi couldn't help but start to read this report with a little nervousness. After a long time, Angzi read the report. He didn't know what to say, and suddenly Angzi felt the pressure on him. It turned out that Popovich said in an interview with ESPN yesterday that the Spurs' goal is to win the next game against the league's new powers. And then when asked who the Spurs will let the Spurs deal with the superb Blake Griffin, Popovich directly named Angzi. So overnight, Angzi made the headlines of major American media, and hit the headlines. Popovich called the Chinese rookie the Griffin Buster, the Chinese rookie will guard Griffin, and so on. He doesn't understand Popovich anymore. What does this mean? In the last game, I didn't give up any playing time. Do I have to let myself be the main force in this game? Angzi hurriedly got dressed and rushed all the way to the training hall. What Angzi didn't know was that because of Popovich's slobber, the domestic situation had completely changed. Hyopu was the first to reprint American media reports, and then the situation reversed. In the next game, Angzi will be regarded as a surprise soldier by Popovich and will play the important role of preventing Griffin from death. Then the question is, the so-called Angzi has lost the trust of the coaching staff. Angzi is arrogant? Angzi has lost the trust of the coaching staff? Then why does Popovich say that Angzi can prevent Griffin from death? Similar speeches, comments, and posts appeared on major portals, post bars, and forums. In addition to the previous rumors by Dao, seen as false reports were immediately exposed. However, people with Angzi rhythm are not completely gone. There are still many people who think that Popovich may just make a joke about Angzi, and the so-called reuse is just to deal with the media. But there are very few people who have made this argument. Even with these people, they can only hope that Angzi will continue to lose playing time in the next game. And Angzi, who rushed to the training hall, urgently wanted to know why Popovich made such remarks last night. But when he arrived at the training center Angzi, he found out that Popovich saw that he was like a okay person at all. He smiled and told Angzi to go to training as soon as possible. Angzi couldn't ask, he could only ask questions. But in the afternoon, Popovich suddenly announced that Angzi would replace Duen Blair into the main team, play a guest power forward, and practice tactics. Now, an 11 is even more puzzled. Is it true that the coach said he wanted to be a surprise soldier? In the afternoon's tactical training, Angzi, who changed to power forward, completed his mission perfectly. After the role was changed to inside, Angzi's ball-holding needs were much smaller, and more of it was cross-screening without the ball. It was only in this role. The change made Angzi's role on the offensive end even smaller. During the entire training game, Angzi failed to score a few points. After the training match, Popovich still didn't mention yesterday's interview, but looking at what he did on this day, Angzi is indeed going to be reused, but this reuse made Angzi a little unprepared. In fact, it was not only Angzi that felt it suddenly, but his teammates also felt it. The original starting power forward Duen Blair thought he could defend Griffin, so in the afternoon training, Duen Blair always very unhappy, but the atmosphere in the Spurs team is still very good. Even so, Duen Blair still talked and laughed with Angzi.